There comes a moment in life, quiet, bitter, and still, when a man realizes that the noise of the world is not his enemy, but his attachment to it is. In that pause between breaths, when the storms of life cease for a fleeting instant, something deeper calls from within, a whisper, an invitation, a key to a door long ignored, the threshold of inner freedom. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." But to awaken is not merely to open one's eyes. It is to see the architecture of one's suffering, to map the ways we have permitted others to crawl beneath our skin, and to take root in our minds. Why does the criticism of a stranger burn so deeply? Why does the indifference of a lover paralyze us? Why do the opinions, moods, and chaos of the world find such a willing host in our hearts? The truth is harsh yet freeing. We are bothered not because of the world, but because we have not built walls within ourselves strong enough to remain undisturbed. We have allowed ourselves to become emotional tenants in houses owned by others. This is the disease of modern man. He is outwardly affluent but inwardly impoverished. He owns technology but not tranquility. He has freedom of movement but no freedom from disturbance. His soul is crowded with ghosts of what people said, what people did, what people might think. And in this haunted house of echoes, peace becomes a stranger. Yet there is a way out. There is a fortress we may construct, not of stone or iron, but of understanding. A citadel built not to isolate us, but to liberate us. A state of being so inwardly sovereign nothing and nobody may bother us again. This journey is not an escape from life, but a return to it. It is the path of the Stoic, the route of the sage, the awakening of the Jungian soul. It is a slow, deliberate shedding of false identities, external dependencies, and psychic clutter. And in its place, a deep silence is born, not empty, but full of power. So let us begin this journey, not toward apathy, but toward mastery, toward the highest form of resilience not found in dominance, but in detachment, not in rejecting the world, but in becoming so inwardly anchored that the world may roar, and yet you remain unshaken. Nothing and nobody will bother you again. To understand how to arrive at a place where nothing and nobody can bother you again, we must first trace the roots of what disturbs us. Not the superficial causes, like an insult or a rejection, but the deeper architecture of disturbance itself. As Carl Jung observed, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Herein lies the paradox. What bothers us about others does not originate in them. It emerges from within, like a seed lying dormant, waiting only for the right moment to be triggered into growth. A careless word, a disapproving glance, a cold silence. These are merely the water and light. The real root lies buried in our unconscious attachments. From our earliest years, we are trained by culture, family, and society to base our worth on external validation. The child learns that approval brings reward, that being liked equals being safe, that love must be earned, and that rejection is a threat. These lessons, embedded beneath our conscious awareness, form the scaffolding of our identity. We grow into adults whose emotional well-being rests on a fragile web of opinions, expectations, and desires, and so we become hostages to circumstances beyond our control. If they praise us, we glow. If they criticize us, we crumble. If they ignore us, we ache. And all the while, we believe the disturbance is caused by them. But this is illusion. In truth, we are disturbed not because of what others do, but because we give them the power to affect our sense of self. This is the hidden contract we sign unconsciously. I will feel good only if you treat me well. A dangerous agreement, for it places the key to our inner peace in hands that do not care for our soul. Epictetus warned of this long before do. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. The power of reaction lies within. And it is only when we reclaim that power that we begin to dissolve the root of all disturbance. The world will never stop provoking you. People will lie, betray, belittle, and abandon. But the question is not whether they will do these things. The question is whether you will allow them to touch the sacred flame within you. Until you see this clearly, you will forever be disturbed, not by others, but by your own unexamined attachments. There is a hidden tyrant that rules over much of human suffering, expectation. Quiet and invisible, it masquerades as hope, as ambition, as planning. But when left unchecked, it becomes a chain around the soul. We expect people to be kind. We expect our efforts to be rewarded. We expect life to follow our script. And when it does not, we feel betrayed, not by reality, but by our illusion of control over it. Carl Jung wrote, "Neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering." In many ways, our constant irritation, disappointment, and inner agitation are symptoms of a deeper, unacknowledged truth, that we are trying to bend the world to our preferences, rather than accepting the world as it is. The man who is bothered by others lives in a constant state of negotiation with life. He attempts to control how he is seen, how he is treated, how his day unfolds. His peace is conditional, fragile and fleeting, because it depends on whether the world behaves as he desires. This is the prison of expectation. You may decorate its walls with positive affirmations, ambition, and planning, but make no mistake, it is still a prison. Marcus Aurelius, emperor and Stoic philosopher, faced betrayals, wars, plagues, and the constant threat of assassination. Yet he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." The man who releases his grip on control does not become passive. He becomes unshakable. Expect nothing, and every gift becomes a blessing. Demand nothing, and every kindness becomes grace. Let go of your script, and life begins to speak in its own profound voice. The psychological shift is profound, from entitlement to acceptance, from resistance to flow. It is not about weakness, it is about alignment with reality. And in that alignment, a strange and beautiful power is born, the power to not be bothered. You begin to see others not as threats to your peace, but as mirrors reflecting your own expectations back to you. Their cruelty reveals your hope for fairness. Their indifference reveals your need to be seen. Their rejection reveals your hunger for approval. And when you let go of what you expected them to, you are free. This is not surrender. It is liberation from the tyranny of a mind that believed it could control a world that never asked for its permission. The world, for many, is a stage of aggravation, a theater of offenders. This person irritates you. That one disappoints you. Another angers you. And yet Jung compels us to ask why. He introduced the concept of the shadow, the hidden part of the psyche, composed of all the thoughts, emotions, desires, and tendencies we repress, deny, or disown. The shadow is not simply a dark corner of the mind. It is the place where we hide the truths about ourselves we cannot face. And tragically, what we reject within, we project without. That which bothers you most in others is often a reflection of something unintegrated within yourself. The arrogance you despise may echo your own unacknowledged pride. The laziness you mock may resemble your own desire to escape. The attention seeker you condemn may mirror your own unmet longing to be seen. The more we deny our shadow, the more power it gains over us, and the more easily we are disturbed by the outer world. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." To become truly undisturbed, not in a shallow or performative way, but in a deep, psychic sense, you must first confront the parts of yourself that you have cast into exile. This confrontation is not pleasant. It is not gentle, but it is the very threshold of liberation. It requires humility, to admit that much of what bothers you is not the world's fault, but a signal of your own unhealed material. This is not self-blame, it is self-revelation. To integrate your shadow is to reclaim your wholeness. When you begin to see that every external irritation is a message from the unconscious, your relationship with life changes. No longer do you beg the world to be quieter, kinder, or more accommodating. Instead, you investigate why certain sounds disturb you, why certain people trigger you, why silence feels unbearable. This is not the path of comfort, it is the path of power. Because once you own what lives in your unconscious, the world loses its ability to manipulate you through it. You become harder to offend, not because you suppress emotion, but because you understand its origin. You don't need to respond to every insult, because you know where it lands inside you, and you no longer fear it. In this way, you become unbothered, not by changing the world, but by no longer hiding from yourself. In a world that thrives on reaction, to remain unmoved is a radical act. We live in an age of immediacy. Messages demand instant replies, insults provoke immediate retaliation, opinions spark compulsive responses. To pause, to withhold, to remain internally still amidst external noise, this is a lost art. But for those who seek to be unbothered, it is a sacred necessity. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." But in order to reach that understanding, one must first resist the compulsion to react. Reaction is not power, it is enslavement. When someone's tone, words, or absence dictates your emotional state, your freedom has already been surrendered. To cultivate non-reaction is not to become emotionally numb. It is to build an inner stillness that allows emotion to arise without allowing it to dominate. The Stoics called this ataraxia, a lucid tranquility, a state not devoid of feeling but undisturbed by it. Epictetus reminded us, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation, the space between stimulus and response. That is where sovereignty lives. Most people never find it. Their lives are strings of automatic reactions, like puppets pulled by invisible threads. One insult, and they bristle. One rejection, and they collapse. One inconvenience, and they rage. But in the pause, in that sliver of silence before the urge to react becomes action, is an entire universe of freedom. Non-reaction does not mean you let others walk over you. It means you choose your response from a position of power, not weakness. You are no longer flinching, but observing, no longer defending, but discerning. The need to be right, to be validated, to retaliate, all these lose their grip on you. This is the transformation, from the emotionally reactive animal to the consciously governed soul. To walk through the world and not be swayed by every storm is to become untouchable, not in arrogance, but in clarity. When you learn to master your nervous system, your perception, your internal dialogue, then the world's provocations bounce off you like raindrops off stone. The truly unbothered do not need to shout it. Their stillness speaks for them. Their presence disarms chaos, and their silence, when provoked, becomes more powerful than any argument could ever be. This is the art of non-reaction, a silent revolution within. To remain unbothered in a turbulent world is not the result of apathy, but of psychological detachment. A conscious uncoupling from the belief that you must emotionally invest in all things that pass before you. It is not about indifference, but discernment. Detachment is not the absence of care. It is the refusal to let external things rule your internal peace. Carl Jung understood this intimately. He believed that man needs difficulties. They are necessary for health. But he also understood that suffering becomes toxic when it is misdirected. When we suffer over things we do not control, when we become entangled in dramas not our own, when we personalize every rejection, every delay, every silence. Psychological detachment is the art of caring deeply without clinging tightly. It is the capacity to engage with life fully, but without being consumed by its chaos. It means loving someone without needing their validation, working hard without making your identity dependent on results, listening to criticism without collapsing into self-doubt. In a world addicted to attachment, titles, outcome, images, relationships, detachment appears rebellious. But it is the only path to authentic stability. The Stoics practiced it as a central virtue. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Receive without pride, let go without attachment." This is not emotional coldness, it is emotional maturity. When you are psychologically detached, you can look at a situation with clarity. You are no longer reacting from fear, insecurity, or ego. You can observe without becoming entangled, reflect without becoming obsessive, and act without becoming desperate. Detachment also means letting others be who they are without taking it personally. If someone misunderstands you, you no longer rush to explain. If they dislike you, you do not scramble to be liked. You realize that the emotional weather of others is not your responsibility to fix. This form of inner separation gives birth to true presence. Because when you are no longer tethered to outcomes, you can be fully available to the moment, alert, calm, and undisturbed. And in this space, the world begins to lose its hold over you. The drama fades into the background. You no longer interpret events as personal assaults, but as fleeting movements in the grand play of existence. You no longer cling to what must pass, nor fear what must arrive. This is not detachment from life, it is detachment from illusion. And only here in this clear space of inner sovereignty can you finally say nothing and nobody will bother me again. There is a silence that is not born of emptiness, but of depth. A solitude that does not echo loneliness, but echoes truth. To live unbothered by the ever-turning wheel of the world, one must build what the ancient sages understood intuitively, an inner sanctuary, a fortress untouched by noise, praise, blame, or desire. Carl Jung did not merely explore the psyche as a map of dysfunction, but as a sacred terrain in which the self, the totality of our conscious and unconscious being, resides. And he often withdrew into solitude, not as escape, but as engagement with something higher. In silence, he listened. In stillness, he saw. Modern life has erased this depth. Every moment is filled, every silence violated. We are taught to connect, perform, respond, always outward, never inward. And yet it is in solitude that the soul breathes. To be unbothered is not to be numb. It is to become deeply intimate with yourself, to know the contours of your inner world so completely that nothing external can displace you. You do not panic in silence because you have befriended your own company. You do not crumble in rejection because your sense of worth is rooted within. The fortress of solitude is not built in a day. It is assembled, brick by brick, each time you choose silence over reaction, reflection over projection, presence over performance. It is reinforced each time you turn inward, not to escape, but to listen to the truths that are too quiet to be heard in the noise. The Stoics retreated into the stillness of their minds, even while among crowds. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, yet returned each night to the citadel of his thoughts. His meditations are not declarations to the world, but whispers to himself, evidence of a man guarding his inner temple. You too must build this place, not in the mountains, but in your own mind, a space to return to when the world hurls its judgments, its dramas, its confusions, a chamber that remains undisturbed, even as storms batter the exterior walls of your life. Here, no one can reach you unless you invite them. No opinion can wound you unless you permit it. No failure can define you unless you allow it to take root. And once this space is fortified, when your solitude becomes sacred, you begin to taste the rarest of freedoms, the power to be with yourself and feel no lack. The outer world often becomes a mirror for the inner world, but the reflection it offers is not always welcome. The image we see in others of arrogance, dishonesty, selfishness, or cowardice can provoke deep discomfort. And yet, as Carl Jung warned, the most dangerous psychological mistake is the projection of the shadow on others. To be constantly bothered by others is to live at the mercy of your own unrecognized projections. Projection is the act of disowning a part of yourself and seeing it instead in someone else. It is a psychological sleight of hand. That which you cannot bear in yourself becomes intolerable in the world around you. And so, people bother you, not because of who they are, but because of what they awaken in you. The man who is secretly afraid of his own weakness will find cowards everywhere. The one who denies his anger will be surrounded by the rude and confrontational. The one who secretly longs to be admired will see pride and vanity in others. And each time he reacts, he unknowingly gives his power away. Jung saw the reclaiming of projections as essential to individuation, the process of becoming whole. Until you face what you've cast outward, you are forever a slave to your reflections. The opinions of others will haunt you. Their behaviors will offend you. Their presence will unsettle you. But not because of them, because of you. To become unbothered, then, is not to demand the world change, but to retrieve the parts of yourself you've scattered across it. This requires ruthless honesty. When someone provokes you, pause. Ask not, why are they like this? But rather, what part of me have I yet to accept? In doing so, you begin the alchemical work of integrating the self. The fragments return. The projections dissolve. The mirror cracks. With each piece retrieved, you reclaim energy. Emotional reactions lessen. Triggers soften. Your peace is no longer fragile because now, the world is no longer a battleground. It becomes a teacher. And each annoyance, a clue. Eventually, you see clearly the people who once disturbed you were simply holding pieces of your psyche up to the light. This is not about blame. It is about ownership. And once you own yourself completely, both your light and your darkness, no one can manipulate you with your unconscious content. You become psychologically whole. And when you are whole, nobody and nothing outside you can truly disturb your peace. Not all disturbances come from the outside. Some of the loudest voices that torment us belong not to others, but to ourselves. Within the architecture of the human psyche, hidden behind layers of personality and perception, lives a figure both ancient and insidious, the inner judge. This is not conscience. Conscience is moral. The inner judge is tyrannical. It whispers cruelly in moments of vulnerability. It criticizes your efforts, belittles your desires, mocks your dreams. And unlike an external critic, you cannot walk away from it, for it lives in your own voice, wearing your own face. Carl Jung understood this internal voice as a fragment of the unconscious, an archetype often shaped by authority figures of childhood. Parents, teachers, institutions, all leave psychic imprints that form the internal tribunal by which you measure your worth. And so, long after the world has fallen silent, the judge remains. It punishes you for not doing enough, for feeling too much, for being too imperfect. It compares you to others, shames your emotions, and condemns your failures. It becomes your first tormentor, long before any person ever insulted or rejected you. To be truly unbothered, you must first silence this inner tyrant. Not by force, but the voice of the inner judge thrives on unconscious belief. It is fed by unquestioned stories about what it means to be worthy, successful, or lovable. It demands perfection because it fears rejection. It critiques failure because it confuses error with shame. But once exposed to light, the voice begins to lose its power. Jung taught that the way forward is not to kill the inner judge, but to integrate it. You must transform it from a tyrant into a guide. This requires self-compassion, an unfamiliar and often radical act for those raised under harsh expectations. Begin by observing the voice without fusing with it. Listen, but do not obey. Question its origin. Where did this standard come from? Whose voice does it mimic? What part of you feels it must always perform, strive, or earn? With time, the judgments soften. In their place arises a new voice, calm, firm, and kind. The voice of the mature self. One that does not deny your faults but sees them as part of your becoming. And when this voice becomes your inner companion, the world's judgments no longer penetrate. Because nothing they say can wound you deeper than you've already healed. This is how you are no longer bothered, not just by others, but by yourself. To be seen, acknowledged, appreciated. This is among the most fundamental of human desires. It begins in infancy as the child seeks the gaze of the parent. It matures into a craving for approval, recognition, even fame. But beneath this yearning lies a dangerous dependency, the need for external validation. And this is one of the deepest traps that keeps a soul disturbed. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But who you are cannot be found in the eyes of others." That gaze is a mirror that reflects only fragments, distorted by expectation and filtered through the limited lenses of others' perceptions. Yet still, we chase it, hoping that someone's recognition might finally anchor our drifting sense of self. But here lies the truth. As long as you require validation to feel whole, you are never free. The pursuit of being understood becomes a prison. You tailor your words so as not to offend. You dilute your truth so others might applaud. You sacrifice silence for noise, solitude for relevance. And in the process, your inner compass grows faint. What does it mean to transcend validation? It is not arrogance nor cold detachment. It is the quiet, noble decision to seek inward alignment over outward approval. To measure your worth not by applause, but by integrity. Schopenhauer noted that fame and recognition are but shadows. They vanish the moment you turn toward them. The man who lives for reputation lives in bondage. But the man who walks his path in truth, regardless of who watches, tastes something far richer: self-possession. There is a moment, small, yet revolutionary, when you realize you no longer need anyone to understand you. You no longer feel compelled to explain your choices, justify your stillness, or prove your value. You simply are. And from that moment onward, the power others once held over you dissolves. Their praise no longer intoxicates. Their criticism no longer bruises. Because your sense of self has moved inward, rooted not in their perception, but in your own grounded being. To transcend validation is to return home to yourself. In this space, you are no longer performing, no longer chasing, no longer asking for permission to exist as you are. And once you are anchored here, nothing and nobody can bother you again, not even the absence of being seen. To walk through life undisturbed, one must first remove the mask that was never truly theirs. Carl Jung called this mask the persona, a social fad, carefully crafted, shaped by expectation, culture, fear, and desire. It is the version of ourselves we present to the world, not to express truth, but to secure belonging. The persona is not evil, it is necessary in part. We all play roles: student, worker, friend, leader. But when these roles become fused with our identity, we begin to live for the mask rather than the soul beneath it. And this is the beginning of inner disquiet. We perform instead of speak. We conform instead of question. We react instead of reflect. And slowly, imperceptibly, the real self retreats. The one who laughs from the gut, cries without shame, loves without fear. That self is buried beneath layers of performance. The tragedy of the persona is this: it keeps you liked but never truly loved. Because the world cannot love a mask, it can only accept it. And this leaves the soul hungry, unseen, and forever disturbed. Jung warned, the world will ask you who you are, and if you don't know, it will tell you. The death of the persona is the refusal to let the world answer that question for you. It is the painful unraveling of false identities and the courageous emergence of your authentic being. But this process is not without grief. You will lose approval. You will confuse those who only knew your mask. You will disappoint the roles you once played. But what you gain in return is priceless peace. Peace because you no longer pretend. Peace because you are no longer fragmented. Peace because you can finally breathe without the weight of performance. When the persona dies, the true self rises, not as an ideal, but as a grounded reality. The self does not seek praise, for it is enough unto itself. It does not panic under scrutiny, for it hides nothing. It does not need to impress, for it is whole. And once you live from this place, you become immune to the world's noise. You no longer live in fear of being found out, because there is nothing false left to uncover. You no longer shrink before judgment, because nothing in you is ever dependent on it. In embracing the death of the persona, you are born again, not into applause, but into freedom. There exists a self beneath the noise, beneath the fears, the masks, the trauma, the expectations. A self untouched by praise or insult, success or failure. Jung called this the self with a capital S, the totality of who you are, both conscious and unconscious, light and dark, divine and human. It is not an identity, it is a state of being. And it is here, in this anchoring, that the journey to being unbothered truly ends. Most live their entire lives in fragments, torn between who they are and who they pretend to be. They are tossed by moods, overwhelmed by change, enslaved by the opinions of others. Their inner landscape is unmoored, chaotic, reactive, and frail. But to discover the self is to find the unshakable center within. It is the quiet flame that does not flicker in the wind. It is the stillness beneath the storm. And once found, it changes everything. Jung insisted that individuation, the process of becoming whole, was not merely about becoming better. It was about becoming real, integrating all aspects of the psyche, not to purify the soul, but to stabilize it. The true self does not seek to be invulnerable. It simply is, and in that being, it is no longer governed by the external world. The unshakable self does not over-identify with thoughts or emotions. It observes without being consumed. It experiences without clinging. It walks into joy or suffering with the same gaze, open, present, unwavering. Schopenhauer, too, described the sage who had found this place. The man who, though wounded by the world, did not collapse beneath it. The one who, when insulted, felt no need to defend. When praised, felt no urge to boast. When abandoned, remained whole. To anchor in the inner being is to trust the eternal beneath the temporary. Your value is no longer tied to roles, results, or recognition. You no longer beg life to give you meaning, you give it. And from this ground, you no longer react, you respond. You no longer grasp, you receive. You no longer fear, you watch. And so, when chaos comes, as it inevitably will, it no longer invades, because the fortress is built, the flame is lit, the self is awake, and in that sacred stillness, nothing and nobody can disturb you ever again. Not because the world changed, but because you did. There is a final gate on the path to inner liberation, a silent, invisible threshold that few cross. Not because it is guarded by external forces, but because it requires the abandonment of something we cling to most, the compulsion to struggle. We have been taught that to struggle is noble. That peace is earned through effort. That silence is the reward for endless striving. But the truth, as Carl Jung and the ancient philosophers knew, is simpler, and stranger stillness is not the absence of struggle. It is the decision to stop fueling it. Most people are not fighting the world. They are fighting themselves. Every disturbance, every argument, every sleepless night is often a battle between what is and what they refuse to accept. Jung often emphasized the importance of holding the tension of the opposites, not rushing to fix, to choose, to resolve, but simply being with the discomfort of what is real. In that space, something greater than logic emerges, a quiet knowing, a psychic clarity. And in that moment, the war ends, not because the world becomes peaceful, but because you stop resisting its nature. Epictetus wrote, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." Stillness, then, is not a passive state. It is the highest expression of freedom. It is the bold refusal to be baited by drama, to be pulled into needless conflict, to be disturbed by the waves when you have become the ocean floor. Choosing stillness is not the same as choosing inactivity. It means acting from a place of grounded intention, not reactive chaos. It means meeting life as it is, without the endless need to edit, correct, or control it. This choice is not made once. It must be made again and again. Each time someone offends you, each time disappointment knocks, each time chaos beckons, and each time you will have to ask, do I respond with struggle, or do I rest in stillness? The world rewards reactivity, but the soul rejoices in calm. And the farther you walk on this path, the more alien disturbance begins to feel. Not because it vanishes, but because it no longer belongs to you. You stand at the final gate, the world behind you, the self before you. No trumpets, no grand arrival, just a simple, steady pulse of truth. You are here, and stillness is enough. Every spiritual journey, every psychological excavation must eventually lead back, not to a mountain peak or desert cave, but to the world itself. The noise, the people, the responsibilities, the unpredictable and the imperfect. But when you return, you are no longer the same. The world may not have changed, but your way of being in it has. You have become undisturbed in a disturbed world. This is the essence of individuation in Jungian psychology, not withdrawal from life, but full engagement with it, from a place of wholeness. You do not hide from people. You do not escape conflict. You simply carry something now that others do not see, an inner equilibrium. You no longer demand peace from the world because you have cultivated it within. And so, the world loses its hooks. The insults no longer enter the bloodstream. The betrayals no longer define you. The noise no longer drowns your silence. Marcus Aurelius ruled amid plagues, betrayals, and the weight of empire, yet wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." You have now built that retreat. You carry it within you like a lantern through darkness, like a compass through storms. But this is not superiority. This is not detachment born from pride. It is detachment born from depth. You have faced yourself, your fears, your shadow, your wounds, and made peace with them. What can the world now take from you? You walk through marketplaces, boardrooms, relationships, and chaos and remain untouched, not indifferent, but sovereign. You can love without losing yourself. You can listen without absorbing poison. You can act without seeking approval. And in this way, your very presence becomes a kind of stillness others feel but do not understand. You are no longer ruled by emotion, but you are not ruled by repression either. You feel, but you are not consumed. You respond, but you are not provoked. You exist in a space between where true wisdom resides. This is what it means to return whole, to walk in the same places with different eyes, to hear the same noise with a quieter mind, to meet the same faces with a heart that no longer trembles. You are home now, not because the world has offered it to you, but because you've built it within. And from this home, nothing and nobody can ever truly disturb you again. There is a rare silence that arises when a man has met himself fully. It is not the silence of emptiness, but of fullness. Not numbness, but clarity. A stillness earned not through adoration. And in that silence, nothing and nobody can bother him again. This is not fantasy. This is not a philosophy reserved for monks or mystics. This is a transformation available to every soul willing to do the inner work, to descend, to confront, to embrace, and to release. What disturbs you was never out there. It was always within. And now you know this. You have walked through the roots of disturbance, through the shadow and its projections, through the illusion of control, through the hunger for validation, through the masks of persona and the judgments of the inner tyrant. You have seen how reaction steals your strength, how expectation binds your freedom, how noise distracts you from yourself. And in seeing, you have begun to reclaim. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." That privilege is not easy. It asks everything. It asks you to lose what the world gave you in order to find what was always yours. It asks you to walk alone, to listen deeply, to remain still as storms circle overhead. But the reward is unshakable, an interior world so whole, so anchored that no chaos can penetrate. People may misunderstand you. Let them. They may reject you. Release them. They may insult you. Observe them. You no longer belong to their opinion, their approval, or their imagination, because you now dwell in truth, your truth. The truth that needs no applause, no defense, no audience. You have become like the mountain, immovable not because it avoids the wind, but because it has rooted itself in the earth. You have become like the sea, not because you are empty, but because you can contain the depths without resistance. You have become like the stars, quiet, constant, unaffected by the noise of those below. To be unbothered is not to escape pain. It is to no longer fear it. It is to feel deeply and still stand, to love even when unloved, to act even when unrecognized, to live even when unseen. This is your inheritance not from the world, but from the self that has waited patiently beneath every disturbance, every breakdown, every ache. And now, at last, you have answered its call. So what now? Now, you return to life, not as a seeker, but as one who is found. You carry your silence with you. You walk through chaos with grace. You love with detachment. You serve with strength. And when the world tests you, as it will, you smile, not because you are superior, but because you are free. And to those still struggling, still grasping, still bothered, you become a quiet invitation. Not a preacher, not a guru, but a living example. A man whose peace is not for sale. A woman whose soul cannot be swayed. A presence that reminds others that this kind of stillness is possible. It is not out there. It is not given. It is not bought. It is built with reflection, with honesty, with courage, with silence. Let others chase the noise. Let others fight shadows. You have found something greater. You have become the place where peace lives. And from this place, nothing and nobody will bother you again. If this journey stored something within you, if you felt the silence between the words echo inside your own soul, then stay with this path. Subscribe not just to this channel, but to your own becoming. Reflect below, not for attention, but for awareness. Share your silence. Share your shift. And above all, remember the journey never ends. The world will tempt you to forget. Return often. Return inward. Because peace is not a destination. Peace is the person you are becoming.